Thank you, Kathy. And the next speaker is Tariq. Before that, I will have Yuli come over to the stage, and also Carol, who is the UCSF host for our program. We have a great time, great minds working and able to network in this place. And everybody commented that how cozy and well organized this looks. And actually, we didn't do anything except just inviting the nicest people and get a good place to have. So I'll let Yuli talk.
I'll tell you the story. The story of the stone soup. How many of you know that story? Oh, okay. So these guys, soldiers, they were walking through and they went into a village and they were hungry. And so they went from house to house and asking for soup or something to eat. And nobody opened their doors. The villagers were scared of these soldiers. So they said, they got an idea. We are going to make stone soup tonight in the village square. So everybody is invited, but just make sure you get one item for the soup. So some people brought carrots, some people brought potatoes and spices. And soon the stone soup, there was just stone and water, it became a great soup. That's what we did here. We just had stones and water, and you guys added the soup. Thank you. And one of the person that did bring some spice into this event is Carol. She's the organizer at UCSF, this building, and she made sure all things were done properly and in order. So we really thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Well, first of all, this is a great honor. As a lot of you know that I am really have nothing to do with clinicians or anything like that. I ended up I'm actually retired, came back, but I want to comment on just listening to what you're doing. I'm a layperson. I'm that consumer. I'm that patient you're talking about. And it's really fascinating to hear the innovation, the thoughts that might affect me, my children, their children growing up. So please keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. The other person who is not here, she's ill today, but that is Dr. Anu Agrawal. And I really want to thank her because she's faculty here and she made sure that we have this space for us today. So thank you, Anu.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tariq Chaudry, and he will talk about virtual health agents.
Okay. Here. Can everyone hear me in the back? Yeah? Okay, great. So, so thank you. I'm really honored to be at this talk with my tribe. I didn't know there was a tribe, and now there is, so I think that's great. I'm a pediatric hospitalist in the Kaiser Permanente system. I do some leadery stuff. Most importantly, I'm an innovator and a dad. And I worked on, so I call these a virtual health agent. This is really a chatbot, just to kind of bring the lexicon more to an equivalent place. And I decided to work on a project, and I'm going to tell you about this in the virtual health care space or chatbot about the new parent journey. That deals with having a new baby, having a colicky baby, dealing with breastfeeding, and how it's the most natural thing to do. It's a huge thing that can drive health outcomes, decreases maternal cancers, decreases obesity, asthma, allergy in children. Really, really important. Super hard to do, as I found out by watching my wife, can be a really painful point. And there's things like postpartum depression that are very serious things that can come out of a totally normal experience. And when we hear people talking about solve for the problem, 25% of my work is dealing with families in the newborn nursery and helping them bring that new life into the world. And it's really hard to learn how to do this thing that's supposed to be really normal, how to take care of this kid that totally changes your universe. And I realized in talking to people that couldn't really absorb all this information within the 48 hours now that they're in the hospital, that maybe they needed something else. And as a dad going through this, I was designing this and helping to lead this project as I had my kids, and I realized I did not know what the heck I was talking about when I started the whole journey. And when, this is my trigger, as Arlen so eloquently spoke, but when I sat in the bathroom at 2 o'clock in the morning, rocking my kid with the shower running in the middle of a drought, because that's what would calm the kid, I said, wow, as a pediatrician, I don't really get what the patient journey and the patient process is. So I have nothing to disclose, unfortunately. I'm looking for some disclosures, if anyone has, no. And so the opinions I'm going to express are mine and not necessarily those of the Permanente Medical Group or Kaiser Permanente. But I just want to share some things because I think they're valuable for the academic community. And as I'm going to talk about, there's not a lot in literature out there. We need AI journal clubs because there's not a lot talking about chatbots and what they're doing. And so, I like to think about the journey of what I think chatbots might be and look at the process of like maps and wayfinding. So how many people came here and they pulled out their paper map to get here? Nobody. I'm going to look over. No, nobody over there either. Hi, guys. Just want to make sure everyone's paying attention out there, too. So this used to be the gold standard for wayfinding, for how we found things. I had like 3 Thomas guides in my old Forerunner back in the day, right? And I've tossed them out now. But this is how we did things, and it was perfectly natural, and everyone accepted it. It's like writing down and not using dictation software, like some of the other things we talked about, right? And then there was this great invention. We came up with this GPS system. It was like, Google Maps. We could actually print out our own personalized directions for us. And it really served us well. And what did we do? I would put it on my front seat and be driving and be like, where am I turning? And it's, was that better? It was better because it was personalized and matched what we needed. But it was also kind of dangerous, but it was a step up from the map system. And then we move into something even better with a great, we had these GPS, dedicated GPS devices, which had these great user interfaces. They really told us information we needed. They talked to us. You could put in a British accent, which is really cool. I love your accent, Joe. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So hopefully you can. But it was really a great step up. And now we can get it on our phones. So we don't even have to buy this other thing. It's just there. We can download it. When there's a cop coming up, you look at traffic patterns. I use these systems every day, not because I need to know where I'm going. I just need to know when I'm going to get there because traffic is so terrible here if you don't live here. So this is something, and how many people would say, oh, now we're going to go back to paper maps right now. This is something we can't live without. We love these devices now, and it's just part of the culture. And when I think about text bots and virtual health agents, I try to be an optimist too, like Prentice Tom, and I think we can get there. But where are we right now in being a guy that's built one and looked at it? I have to be honest. I think we're somewhere in here where maybe we're printing something out that, so we're early on in it, but there's a great journey that if we follow, we can get to something that is a really great user experience and help solve for a lot of our problems in healthcare. So that's the optimist in me talking about that. And really, I think we have to focus on the challenges of healthcare delivery, and so many of us have talked about this. And really, as a clinician, limited time for patient-physician interaction is probably one of the biggest drivers. And when you have a space like well care, where these things that should be easy to do, we give people discharge instructions, hey, just do this. There's open source material, but still, it's really hard to deal with breastfeeding, or what do you do with a colicky kid that was crying like mine? And keeping you up all night. And then you can't sleep and you can't think and then you can't remember anything anyone said, which is true when when I'm trying to give all this advice and sit down and talk to someone in the hospital. They're like, they nod and have their head and then they forget everything I said as soon as they get discharged. And they need it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And gosh, and nobody reads the paper anymore. It's in the trash can, right? So I was trying to think about how we do this. Social determinants of health is everything. Can people drive in from a long distance? Can people take time off work? There's so many financial stresses. There's a stigmata of mental health disease. Are people going to talk about their postpartum depression? We don't. But a lot of people have it out there. Is there an outlet for them? And we have these technologies that really, and as I found out, don't have a lot of clinical content, like good digital clinical content, and we have to build it. There's not a lot of great digital photos out there that are not PHI. There's not a lot of great digital videos. There's a smaller market of these things that we can use to really help educate and reassure our parents. And a lot of it in this space is really about educating and reassuring our parents and empowering them. So, I mean, the realities with virtual agents or chatbots is, they can perform work at lower cost. I think they totally can. The price that we have to pay is that the neural networks or the knowledge trees that you have to build in healthcare around clinical problems are very nuanced. You have to put a tremendous amount into doing them right. And we certainly spent a lot of time doing that. You have to have good quality controls. You have to make sure you're not injecting clinician bias. You have to think about what populations you're serving. It's really, really important to do it right, and it's a big, heavy lift. And if anyone is thinking about getting like diagnostic symptom checkers and chatbots, you have to be prepared for that lift. It's big, and it has to be multidisciplinary, and it's not just about a doctor. It's about nurses. It's about, in our space, there's lactation consultants, health educators, call center nurses. We had to talk to the system engineers and our architects, our user experience designers. We had to talk to everyone, a whole big spectrum. The hope of, can machine learning increase chatbot efficiency? Yes, but you got to get to the place where you can test it, and you got to get into a sandbox where you can use it and not hurt your patients. And thankfully, the space we're working in is like a low acuity space, so there's less likely to have harm, but it was still important to get it right. This is an article that I looked up, one of the few pieces of literature I could really find on chatbots and virtual health agents. This is from Millicent, 2018. I think that the title is like, there's Dr. Google in the title, so immediately I was like, caught my eye, because that's a real pain point. And even the feedback we got from our pilot were like, why do I want to use this? I want to go back and use Dr. Google, right? Because that's easy, It broke down the findings into two basic categories. So there were several types of common chatbots out there, and then there were some recommendations for learning about it and advancing the academic study of it, which is really basic. So one of the most common types is an algorithm-based symptom checker. This is just something that tries to help identify problems. This is in the class of what we designed, what I'm going to tell you a little bit more about. And then there's sensor-driven photo analysis algorithms. These are basically dermatology apps in this particular study. So they're basically looking at photo, trying to analyze which are pathologic lesions and which are not. And I think a lot of the radiology things are basically going in the same direction. And then there were some crowdsourcing platforms that try to bring in data from different areas. And what are the recommendations that came out of this article? Really, really basic. Is that one thing is that there wasn't a great systematic way to report clinical outcomes. Some of the articles were reporting sensitivity and specificity for a specific process and a specific thing, but they didn't really talk about patient outcomes. So it's really important that we actually connect this to outcomes, because that's what matters ultimately. The simple thing, like the names of the apps weren't included in the papers, so nobody could go back and look at what you were talking about. And that's kind of silly, right? And I think as we're doing this, we have to identify those things. Nor were the key technologies involved in driving the chatbots, they weren't included in that either. So like if you have a natural language processing based chatbot, you want to say that so we can actually talk about and start saying, hey, these NLP devices are working well, or something's using machine learning. And we weren't even doing that. And then also important was getting a consistent evaluation methodology. And so there's an example. I won't go into the mnemonic because I don't remember. It's like 14 words, even though it's 6 letters. But Sunday. So it's basically like this came out of the British Medical Journal. It's basically like a system for laying out a paper and what to systematically address when you're looking at a digital tool. So these are some really basic things that we can do as an academic community and do things like this and come into forums like this and talk about it more. And so this is a terrible slide. I apologize. I'm not going to have you read all the numbers. But the good news from this is, I breathe a sigh of relief, is that as a doctor right now, so doctors outperform symptom checkers. Whew. Okay, so my clinical practice is still intact. So and maybe if you're not in clinical practice, you're like, Okay, but and doctors are better at high acuity and rare diagnoses, which I think is a element of the way physicians are trained. We're trained to look for zebras. We want to think of what can harm the patient. You know, we don't necessarily think about what's common, or we treat with what's common all the time, but we are definitely better at this. And so there was, you know, doctors were like twice as good at diagnostics in this particular study. And just to say something about the way they did this, it's a good example of methodology. They have a symptom checker, and then they matched it versus some clinicians. And they took case-based scenarios, basically ran the symptom checker, and then ran it against a doctor and a nurse. And they looked at who had the most accurate differential diagnosis. They looked for the top 1 differential diagnosis and then the top 3. So the doctors were outperformed. And then they looked at high, medium, and low clinical acuity, and then looked at common and uncommon diagnosis. So the doctors were generally had a 2-to-1 overall improvement ability to get the right differential diagnosis. But the gap did close a little bit, which I thought was interesting. It closed by about 5 to 7% for the low acuity and common diagnoses. So I think that's an interesting area. And you know, retrospectively, that happens to be where we were aiming, so it makes me feel a little bit better, right? And this is another article that's from a non-peer-reviewed journal, but I thought it was important because it was from a medical health exec journal that came out in 2018, and it kind of told us a lot of opinions about what. It was a survey of like 1,200 customers and then like 100 healthcare employees and executives, and it said that, you know, basically people don't trust chatbots right now, which I think is, you know, people would rather talk to humans, although they do think it's okay for simple problems. And I think that's important. But customers are really concerned about quality. And I think in healthcare, that's vitally important. We have to make sure we get it right. And your chatbot basically has to be able to provide the same quality as a live agent, or when they hit their limits, seamlessly turn over the conversation to a live agent with a warm handoff so the live agent can really do it well. So I think there's a caveat to that there's ways to do this. So a lot of this literature came out after we were done with our project. And so I think we can kind of back apply it now as I take a step back and look at it. But the goals of our program, I think we're trying to mesh with some of these things and trying to bring in design thinking. We did look at, you know, utilization. We looked at a lot of problems. We talked to families out there. A lot of us in the team use our own care experience. And we wanted to improve the new patient journey, and I talked about these 3 main topics that were problems, and there was some basically unplanned utilization that was occurring due to a lot of stress and anxiety. People were coming in for extra visits, a lot of call center calls, people worried about things that could be solved with reassurance and with better education. So there was an opportunity there, and we were wondering if we could decrease utilization. You know, and this, as we started out, this was really kind of a feasibility trial. So, you know, we weren't at the point where we were going to randomize. So we're saying, yeah, it would be nice to decrease utilization. That was really a secondary goal because we didn't think we'd be able to enroll like 600 patients or something and be able to get this great statistical data. So, but we kind of generally wanted to look at this and look at the care experience. So what did we do specifically? So we have a text-based chatbot. It was built on natural language processing. And it was basically knowledge was built into these core care areas. So basically, you know, obstetrics, pediatrics, and psychiatry for the different types of problems that we were trying to solve in each area. So integration was really, I think, unique in our project, and I haven't read something that's tried unique integration. We're in an integrated care system, so we have this big sandbox that has all the pieces of the universe. So just at a really high level, without going into too much detail, we basically try to integrate that chatbot with everything. So we could connect to our EMR. And we had pieces of data that could basically feed in to the EMR, such as like depression inventories could come in and flag. We could, on an automated basis, flag our call center and have patients call into the call center if they needed it. You could email your doctors. You could send some pictures in. There was some recognition of certain patient histories. Like, for example, if we had a patient with postpartum depression somewhere in our EMR with history, we could pull that data and we could actually serve up our depression trees. And basically, we're more likely to actually survey someone and do what's called like a PHQ-9 survey, like a validated depression inventory. So we customized things. We knew patients' names. We knew the babies' names. We customized some of the information based on age. So it's a little microcosm. We're trying some precision medicine, right? Because a 2-day-old baby is different than a 5-day-old baby. That's different than a 7-day-old baby. They do slightly different things, and it causes a huge amount of worry. So, and then I think the biggest thing we wanted to do is focus on multimodal education. So instead of paper handouts like is the current standard or our conversations, we wanted to get that same information with our standardized discharge content and present it in pictures, video, text after the fact so people could access it whenever they want 24/7. And we thought that was really important, and we tried to get a nice user interface to get that. So what did people think? So when we had a lot of test groups, focus groups, we basically ran this through quality control groups, and a lot of people really liked it in the design phase, providers, patients that we were testing on. And then we basically ran a quick pilot to look at feasibility. I want to say that failure is a growth mindset, and so we didn't exactly meet our goals. So we had high adoption up front, so in the first several days within the week, and then adoption tapered off over time, and we really didn't get sustained adoption in it. And some of the design elements really affected the sustainability, and our patients told us about this. Now, so I'm going to get back to that in a second. So what elements did people use in here? We actually built in a lot of self-help trackers, things like soothing sounds, lullabies, white noise generators. That was like a big idea from the personal pain point from that story I told you earlier. People use that, a huge proportion, like half the usage was actually not using the natural language processing chatbot. So that was surprising for us. That was something we learned, but it was very easy for people to access that, and that was something that was really important to them. And symptom checking was secondary, but we did get the next biggest topic was breastfeeding, which was one of our core goals. Rash support elimination, which is basically diapering information. There was escalation to our healthcare system, both with calling call centers and then emails going in. And unfortunately, because of our small size of our pilot and the time frame, nobody actually got to activate the postpartum depression pathways or the sick baby pathways or the fever algorithms. So we had a bunch of great content that didn't actually get used, and we couldn't really test it. But so what did we learn from a lot of the feedback we got and what we saw is that there's absolutely strong interest in this technology. People really, really wanted to use it, and they had really high expectations. Especially from their healthcare provider, they wanted it to be perfect. They didn't want any mistakes. They wanted other things. They wanted social media involved, due to compliance law, we weren't allowed to bring that in. We knew it would be a problem, and then they told us about it afterward. The natural language processing sometimes was inaccurate, and that was a major thing that could actually push people off. They want to save time. We weren't able to build in warm handoffs with our call center due to the logistical things. They weren't ready to accept our program in development. Unexpected questions are a problem. Prompts, the conversational user interface wasn't what the patients appreciated most. A lot of them actually wanted some non-conversational interface. Basically, they wanted menus to be able to select from. And a lot of this is like people aren't used to using a lot of chatbots in a format like this, and they wanted to go back to what they knew. And a lot of people ended up not accessing a lot of the content we had in there because of that. So if I went back, I would basically put in menus as well to complement the natural language processing to allow an area for people to jump in and engage in the conversations, and then the chatbot could activate afterward. The engaging features were really important. We actually needed to make them cleaner and a little prettier because some of our device trackers, which were a secondary feature, were actually the most used, and they wanted them to be pristine. And so that in the future, getting a lot of polish on a product that you try, I think, is something that's really important. Trust was very important. We couldn't have any errors. It had to be accurate. And they expect the highest quality from us because this is their child. This is someone's wife. So you really have to do well with healthcare in this space. I'll try to finish up. So to kind of sum up, when you build your own agent, you have to really know the strategy of your organization. You have to know your content well and engage multiple people, engage all your stakeholders in this. And I think the most important things here are actually these last two things. You got to know your patients and know what they want, talk to them a lot, solve for their pain points, look at why they're coming into care and try to solve for those things, which is what we tried to do. And I think you have to build with love. You have to think about your families. And if you're just thinking about money and building something to write a paper on or something like that, I think you have to really rethink what you're doing. And I was building this with my kids in mind and my wife in mind. And I think that's really important to do because that's going to take you down the right path. It's going to help empower patients. That's what these chatbots are really for. We decrease utilization and stuff, but it's really about, if you go to the clinical heart of this, it's really about patients being able to help themselves and not have to drive into the ER and not have to call or take the day off of work to come in. It's to solve those easy problems. We have to build it with them. And we have to, I think there's an opportunity to focus a lot of these on preventative and holistic solutions because those are what are the core of patients' health problems are sometimes. And they can help us with social determinants of health. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.